Hello, this is Dr. Garrett Castleberry, Program Director for Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University. I'm here with a video discussion prompt for COM 3433, Media Studies in Research and Design. Media Studies R&D, we're sampling each of our key texts this week in the class, and so it gave me an opportunity to peruse each of those readings, looking for an ideal way to spark some question, or rather some discussion between us. I'm really keen on working through Strangelove's Post-TV, Piracy Core Cutting in the Future of Television, and enjoying that, but didn't find the perfect question to help kind of open up our interactions. Also, big fan of Jason Mattel's Television and American Culture. That chapter 1 is also had some options, but ultimately elected not to go with that. I did, however, settle on Amar Jean Christian's Open TV, Innovation Beyond Hollywood and the Rise of Web Television. And reading through this, very interested in not just media or rather television, but what it's doing, where it's going. And I think these are important questions for us to have, not just thinking in terms of being audiences of this content or consumers of this content, but some of you will go on to become producers of such content, producers of all kinds of content, really. And aren't we already producers, or what's often called prosumers? All right, so we're kind of producing content, sometimes even at the consumer level, and maybe there's a bit of a tie-in here. I want to draw on a short excerpt from page 31 of Open TV. I'm going to read it and then kind of follow up with my own prompt for us in week 2. Let's see, where should I begin? Author is talking about basically setting the stage and looking at how, chapter 1 is subtitled Innovation for the Open Network. So it's looking at 1995 to 2005 and many of the innovations that began to take place for television shifts toward internet as a space to store that kind of content. And there's some excellent setup about describing between our key texts this week a lot of conversations that help us understand how, regardless of how we think we're operating at these different levels of, oh, I'm not a TV person, I'm a streaming person, or, well, I only like web TV, I would never pay for cable. So, a vast majority of this content all falls under these giant umbrellas if we look hard enough and sort of go beneath the surface of things. And but there's a lot of independent content being produced all the same. Anyway, back to page 31 of Open TV. I'm going to read a section. While broadcast networks have released and produced web programs since the beginning, some of the greatest, most enduring innovations came from those disadvantaged in the legacy system. So legacy system, we're talking about those things that are, whether it's overt or covert, they're funded by a larger company. So great ideas can emerge even if they aren't produced by some, mega large organization. This chapter, setting up chapter 1, explores the history of episodic web programming, variously called web series, webisodes, bitcoms, web television, and in its earliest forms, cyber soaps. As producers and entrepreneurs developed channels and programs indebted to, but also distinct from, legacy television, end quote. And I think that's interesting. I think maybe a conversation starter for us would be something along the lines of, when was the first time you recall shifting priority to a consistent type of web-based content? So in other words, content that is distributed along the lines of through internet means, okay? And let me just, play with this timeline that they're setting up and draw an example from way back. I can remember some of the shows that really started to take this turn between traditional modes of consumption as an audience member on TV, but also additional types of content you could access through what was in some ways web exclusive, although there are other ways to get that. One example that comes to mind is The Office. Okay, so The Office, a show that is now, has ended years ago and has been canonized. People, binge watching episodes nonstop. It is wildly popular, but it was never just destroying numbers in terms of its regular audience viewership. But it had that cult following that was strong and robust, and it kind of would grow, just not always at the same time. So people would find it later. One way that helped or proved successful was that NBC, the original broadcast network that would air The Office, which itself was based on a BBC series, right? So it's an imported idea from the UK. But the American version of The Office would host these little outtakes, deleted scenes, and webisodes on the NBC website. And so I can remember finding some of those and maybe spending some extra time kind of surfing through that website, revisiting it, right? So giving the website traffic to get to those webisodes, that sort of thing. I can also remember Lost being the kind of show. Okay, Lost was produced and distributed on ABC, and Lost would have these sorts of continuous mysteries, of course, what the show is known best for, but they would embed certain kinds of images, conversation starting ideas, right, sort of mythic symbolism and so on. And then in addition to message boards as a place people would go to speculate and talk about it, you could find in later seasons some interactive games or clues, if I'm not mistaken, to unlock if you would visit the websites for that additional content. Okay, and then so just like both of these series I mentioned, you could also access those materials a little bit later on their DVD box sets. All right, so what these texts do, these texts entertain us at a television level, but then they go on to sort of reward your membership, quote unquote, to be a fan of that text. So not just an audience member. A casual audience member would watch it and then let it go. A fan would find those ways to add layers of fandom, right, of exchange. A prosumer, right, to buy into what they're doing through different means and through different mediums. Okay, so that is my example that comes to mind. I can recall watching webisodes of Office, The Office specifically. And so tell us about, doesn't have to be a television series, but tell us about one of those series that you can consciously think of that either your interest started on the internet or grew because of the product, the webisode, the cyber soap, the whatever, that you located but had to consume through an online channel. Look forward to these responses as we engage in week 2 of Media Studies in Research and Design. Thank you.